What you are about to hear will shatter everything you thought you knew about the invisible wounds of war and the power of human compassion. This is not just another feel-good story. This is the raw, unfiltered truth about a man who survived the battlefield but nearly died from the war that raged inside his own mind for 23 years, until one complete stranger decided to risk everything to save him. Picture this: a decorated war veteran sits alone in a one-bedroom apartment that hasn't seen sunlight in months. Empty pizza boxes stack like monuments to isolation. Beer cans create a fortress around his chair, the same chair where he has spent the last 8 years watching the world move on without him. His name is Marcus Thompson. And for 2 decades he carried secrets so dark, so heavy, that they crushed his soul piece by piece, until nothing remained but a ghost of the hero he once was. But before we dive into the darkness that consumed Marcus, let me tell you about the moment that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning when Sarah Chun was running late for her nursing shift at the local hospital. She lived in the apartment directly above Marcus, and for 3 years she had heard the same sounds every single night. Muffled crying, angry shouting at invisible enemies, the sound of furniture being thrown against walls, followed by hours of deadly silence. Most neighbors would have complained to the landlord, most would have moved away, but Sarah was different. She had lost her younger brother to suicide 2 years earlier, and she recognized the signs of a man drowning in his own mind. That Tuesday morning, as she rushed down the stairs, she noticed something that stopped her dead in her tracks: the newspaper. Outside apartment 2B had been piling up for 6 days. The mail was overflowing. Marcus hadn't been outside in nearly a week. What Sarah did next defied all logic, all safety protocols, and all common sense. She knocked on that door, and when no one answered, she kept knocking for 47 minutes. She stood in that hallway knocking and calling out until finally she heard movement inside. The door cracked open, revealing a man she barely recognized, gone hollow-eyed, with a beard that hadn't been trimmed. In months, Marcus Thompson looked like he was already dead. Sarah could have walked away. She could have called the police or social services. She could have done what everyone else had done for years, which was nothing. Instead, she looked into those broken eyes and made a decision that would either save a life or destroy her own. She pushed past him into that apartment, and what she found inside was a crime scene of the soul. The apartment was a museum of trauma, military medals scattered across a coffee table like discarded dreams, photographs of fallen comrades taped to every wall, alongside newspaper clippings about veterans who had taken their own lives. A loaded pistol sat on the kitchen counter next to a handwritten note that simply read, "I am sorry." The smell of unwashed clothes and rotting food filled the air, but what broke Sarah's heart was the silence. The deafening silence of a man who had been screaming inside for 23 years. Marcus had served 3 tours in Afghanistan. As a combat medic, he had saved 47 lives under enemy fire. He had carried wounded soldiers through minefields. He had performed surgery in bombed-out buildings while mortar exploded around him. The military called him a hero. The government gave him medals. The newspapers wrote stories about his bravery. But nobody talked about what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. Nobody talked about the nightmares that came every single night without fail. Nobody talked about the survivor guilt that ate away at his sanity because he came home when so many of his brothers didn't. Nobody talked about how the skills that made him a perfect soldier made him completely unable to function in civilian life. Nobody talked about how the man who could save lives in a war zone couldn't even save himself from the war inside his own head. For 23 years, Marcus had been fighting a battle that nobody could see. He had tried therapy, but how do you explain to someone who has never held a dying 19-year-old in their arms what that weight feels like? He had tried medication, but the pills just numbed the pain without healing the wounds. He had tried alcohol, but that only made the ghost louder. He had tried isolation, thinking that if he could just disappear from the world, maybe the memories would disappear too. But the memories never disappeared. They grew stronger. They multiplied. They turned his dreams into battlefields and his waking hours into survival mode. He stopped going to family gatherings because he couldn't pretend to be normal. He stopped dating because he couldn't explain why loud noises made him dive for cover. He stopped working because he couldn't concentrate. He stopped living because existing was taking every ounce of strength he had. The day Sarah found him was the day he had finally decided to stop fighting. He had written the note. He had loaded the gun. He had said goodbye to the photograph of his unit, the only family he felt he had left. He was waiting for nightfall when the knocking started, and something about that persistent, gentle knocking reminded him of his mother, who used to wake him up for school by tapping softly on his bedroom door. Sarah didn't just save Marcus that day, she declared war on his demons, and she fought that war with the same intensity that he had once fought for his country. She moved into his apartment for 6 weeks, refusing to leave him alone. She threw away the gun. She ripped down the photographs of death and replaced them with images of life. She opened every curtain and window, filling that tomb with light and fresh air. She cooked meals and forced him to eat them. She made him shower and shave. She dragged him to therapy appointments and sat in the waiting room. She held him when he cried. She listened when he finally started talking about the horrors he had witnessed. She celebrated every small victory: when he slept through the night without screaming, when he went to the grocery store, when he smiled for the first time in years. But the real miracle wasn't just that Sarah saved Marcus. The real miracle was what happened when Marcus started to heal. He remembered why he had become a medic in the first place. He remembered the feeling of saving lives, of making a difference, of being part of something bigger than himself. And he realized that there were thousands of veterans just like him, suffering in silence, convinced that nobody cared. Together, Marcus and Sarah started a nonprofit organization called Battle Buddy. They created safe spaces where veterans could talk without judgment. They provided emergency intervention for veterans in crisis. They connected isolated veterans with support networks. They turned Marcus' apartment building into a community where veterans looked out for each other. Within 2 years, Battle Buddy had saved 64 lives. Veterans who had given up hope found reasons to keep fighting. Veterans who had been forgotten by society found family. Veterans who had been broken by war discovered that their scars could become sources of strength, not shame. The organization expanded to 12 cities, then 20, then 50. Marcus became a national advocate for veteran mental health. He testified before Congress. He appeared on television. He spoke at high schools and colleges, sharing his story, not for sympathy, but to shatter the stigma that keeps so many veterans suffering in silence. He turned his pain into purpose, his trauma into triumph, his breakdown into breakthrough. Sarah never asked for recognition. She never wanted fame or fortune. She simply saw a human being in pain and decided to act. And her decision to risk everything for a stranger she barely knew created ripples that spread across the entire country, touching thousands of lives and changing the conversation about veteran mental health forever. But this story isn't over. Marcus still fights his demons every single day. The difference is that now he doesn't fight alone. He has Sarah, who became his closest friend and eventually his business partner. He has a community of veterans who understand his struggles. He has a purpose that gets him out of bed every morning, and most importantly, he has hope. The apartment that was once his prison became a sanctuary. The man who was ready to end his life became a beacon of hope for others. The stranger who knocked on his door became the sister he never had. And the organization they built together became a lifeline for veterans across America who finally realized they were not alone. What makes this story so powerful is not just the transformation of one man. It's the reminder that every single day we walk past people who are drowning in their own minds. We encounter strangers who are one kind word away from hope or one more rejection away from despair. We have the power to be someone's Sarah, to be the person who refuses to give up on someone who has given up on themselves. Marcus Thompson is alive today because one woman decided that a stranger's life was worth fighting for. He is thriving because someone saw past his broken exterior to the hero trapped inside. He is saving lives because someone saved his first, and thousands of veterans across America sleep better at night because two people decided that silence was not an option, that isolation was not inevitable, and that no veteran should ever have to fight the war after the war alone. This story challenges us to look beyond ourselves, to notice the quiet suffering around us, to be willing to knock on doors that others ignore. It reminds us that heroism isn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes it's about showing up for someone when everyone else has walked away. Sometimes it's about refusing to let someone disappear. Sometimes it's about being the light in someone's darkness, even when you don't know if they want to be saved. The next time you hear strange sounds from a neighbor's apartment, the next time you notice someone withdrawing from life, the next time you encounter a veteran who seems lost or broken, remember. Marcus and Sarah, remember that your willingness to get involved could be the difference between life and death, between hope and despair, between a tragic ending and a story of redemption that changes the world. If this story moved you, if it opened your eyes to the hidden battles being fought all around us, if it inspired you to be the person who refuses to walk past suffering, then I need you to do something right now. I need you to subscribe to this channel, because every week I bring you stories like this, stories that matter, stories that challenge us to be better human beings, stories that remind us of the power we have to change lives. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that could change your perspective, your heart, or even your life. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, with someone who might be fighting their own invisible battle, with someone who has the power to be another person. Sarah, comment below and tell me about a time when a stranger made a difference in your life, or when you made a difference in someone else's, because these stories, these moments of human connection and compassion, these examples of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, these are what give me hope in a world that often feels broken. And they should give you hope too. They should remind you that no matter how dark things get, there is always someone willing to knock on the door. There is always someone willing to fight for you. There is always someone who sees your worth even when you cannot see it yourself. Subscribe now and join a community of people who believe that every life matters, that every story deserves to be heard, and that every one of us has the power to be the hero in someone else's story, because the world needs more Sarahs, and the world needs more people who understand that sometimes the most important battles are fought not on distant battlefields, but in apartment buildings and coffee shops and grocery stores, where ordinary people make extraordinary choices to save lives one knock at a time.